levels will be up again this year. So we're getting there. And there are some people who are returning based. I've met a couple yesterday who was on a cruise, but has now come here and get married in July. So it's happening in great numbers, not as probably as much as we want to, but they are coming.
Supplementary?
No, Mr. Speaker.
Third question?
Well, it's a cheeky question. Can I ask it?
You can ask your question as long as it's on the subject before it.
Well, I did my homework for the Sea Trade Global Conference, and I noticed that I would venture to say maybe 50% or more of the actual panel discussions and workshops were around careers in the cruise industry. And so I'm just curious whether the minister is aware of any real motivation or initiative to see whether Bermudians might be interested and what we can do to encourage Bermudians into cruise careers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister?
Well, the honorable member is actually wrong. About 50% was around career, about cruising or careers in the cruise. No, that's not true. It was around everything else. The port of Boston and Philadelphia. One of the reasons why they're setting up over there, so they can be closer to Bermuda to come here. That's the first thing. So we had some discussions on that. That avenue is available for Bermudians. As a matter of fact, I believe the Minister Scott, Lawrence Scott, had worked on something and trying to encourage Bermudians to go on a ship. And that's what we can do. But the avenue is there for them to make it happen if they want to.
Yeah, I have a supplementary. I'd like to ask the minister where and how young people might be able to start that conversation. Where do they go if they'd like to know more about a career in the cruise ship industry?
I will find that information out and give it to you if you want. Yeah.
It was answered? Okay. Supplementary? No? Thank you. Minister, that's the only questions that were for you this morning. We'll now move on. The next statement that has questions this morning is a statement from the Minister of National Security. Minister, the opposition leader would like to put questions to you.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning, honorable colleagues. Good morning to the listening public. I'd thank the honorable minister to inform this honorable House. In his statement on the last page, he states that the Cybersecurity Act incorporates the lessons learned from the cyber attack. Would the honorable minister be able to confirm that these lessons have been, that in fact the cyber attack has been reviewed by the government to generate those lessons learned?
Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't want to go too much into this paper at this time, but sometime during the day we will be doing the debate on the motion to have a joint select committee, and we will have more detail there.
Supplementary?
Mr. Speaker, I'm a little confused. We have a motion coming up later today. I take the honorable member's point. If I can read that motion so we can get it on the record. Be it resolved that this honorable House approves the establishment of a parliamentary joint select committee to examine and review matters surrounding the cyber attack on government IT systems in September of 2023, and to report to this House its findings and recommendations in due course. Mr. Speaker, the honorable minister then just stood up and tabled an act before the review. So I'm asking questions about the act that he's going to table before we debate. So my question is, has the government conducted a review? It's a yes, no.
Minister?
Mr. Speaker, just for clarity, the government has done a review and a report has been done. I don't have it.
Fantastic, thank you. Will the government or will the honorable minister table that review alongside the Cybersecurity Act so that we may evaluate the suitability of the act given the recommendations from that report?
I don't want to preempt the Joint Select Committee, but I'm sure that eventually the report will be tabled.
Supplementary?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honorable minister for his questions, and we'll deal with this under the debate. Thank you.
Any further questions? None? Thank you. Members, that brings us to a close of the statements for this morning. We'll now move on. The next item is congratulatory and obituary speeches. Would any member, Minister Campbell, are you on your feet for this?
Damn.
Minister Campbell, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, yesterday I had the privilege of attending the celebration of life service for Charlene Patricia Simmons, a constituent of mine. She's the wife of trade unionist Colin Simmons, the mother of Abdul, Johnny, and Akil Simmons. What we heard during the celebration of life service was that Charlene had a strong work ethic that was balanced by a zest and love for life and enjoyment of life. And one of her skills that was highlighted was she was quite the master in the kitchen. And I can attest to that, Mr. Speaker, in that I enjoyed some of the treats that she baked at the 2017 polling station during the general election. Again, Mr. Speaker, we have lost another treasure in Devonshire. They've gone on to greener pastures, and I would like condolences to be sent to the family. On a happier note and on a sporting note, I want to congratulate coaches Ben Smith and Shona Palmer. I had the pleasure of greeting the swimming team, those members that did return to the island. They had a very successful Carifta swimming championships, winning 23 or 24 medals. Connor Hopman, in particular, won 7. Elijah Daly, I believe, won 4. Madeline Moore, Logan Watson Brown, and Rory Shepard won 3. Catherine Redden won 2. We had Adriana Argent and Della House also winning medals, I believe. And there were other members of the team. But well done to the swimming team, well done to the coaches. And lastly, on a sporting note, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate St. George's Cricket Club for winning their first FA Cup. PHC, Associate the Whole House. PHC on winning back-to-back league titles. Devonshire Colts for going 16-0 and winning the first division. PHC won the premiership for 2 years in a row. And Wolves, my constituency team, for winning promotion to the premiership along with Devonshire Colts. So congratulations to our athletes, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I start off sadly by sending condolences to the family of Cecil Junks Durham, Mr. Speaker, and I'll associate the entire House with this, Mr. Speaker. While I did find out that we had a very close family tie later on in life, and I didn't really know him, I did know of his work within the Progressive Labor Party, which I did hold in high esteem, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Junks not only ran in 2 elections, the second and third one that were carried out under the new constitution, but he also was the chairman of the party. He also conducted audits for the party, free of charge, of course. Later on in life, he would still remain active with C7, organizing events for them, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, he's also a former drum major awardee, and he was also part of the 50 people celebrated at the 50th anniversary of the Progressive Labor Party as one of the 50 grassroots members that have made the party that it was. Mr. Speaker, he was a trailblazer. He was a gentleman. He was also known for his work with the BIU for many, many years as well. And I would like condolences sent to him and his family on this occasion. Mr. Speaker, I also like condolences sent to the family of Ross Reed Robinson, a constituent of mine that passed. I know sitting down with Ross and having conversations with him, he always was an avid gardener, and he had lots of things growing in his garden. I remember one time taking my daughter with me so she could explore his garden and look. And so he's a tremendous loss to the Loyal Hill area, Mr. Speaker. And And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to send congratulations to the Department of Education, namely Miss Shannon Rose Robinson, for the Springing into the Arts series that started last night. Last night, we were treated with wonderful displays from our senior schools, Mr. Speaker. And I do encourage all members of Parliament to please put down in their calendars to attend one of the next three events, which will feature the Eastern region of schools, the Central region of schools, and the West region of schools. Those will be held on March 9th, March 16th, and March 30th. And those, Mr. Speaker, are at Cedar Bridge Academy starting at 6 o'clock in the Ruth Seaton James Center for Performing Arts. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, and this was something that came especially to me last week, I was asked to ensure that I sent a congratulations. You should recognize this to Walter and Brenda Lister on the 51st, the occasion of their 51st anniversary. You may wonder why I'm sending that out. Brenda is a relative of mine as well. And so they were married on April 20th, 1968, and they celebrated 56 years of blissful marriage here recently. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Deputy Speaker, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with the remarks of Cecil Jones Storm. He was a man who gave off his heart and his pocket. He was very kind, gentle to everyone he met. His demeanor never changed. Cecil Jones Storm played for the best team in Bermuda in the 60s and early 70s, Devonshire Colts. And he also played while he attended university, played for Howard University. And he was the one that scored the goal that resulted in victory for Howard University as being the first historically Black college in the United States to win a national collegiate title. And I also like to associate Minister Weeks, Mr. Speaker. Cecil was a treasurer at the BIU, having worked first down Front Street in one of the banks, and he was lured away by the BIU, and he worked there, and he was an integral part of our executive. Cecil leaves to mourn his wife of 60 years, Deanna Musson from Frog Alley, as I knew it. And no, Frog Alley, you just came lately. And I stayed down there. And two children, Brian and Kayla, and 3 grandchildren, Mr. Speaker. Cecil will be sorely missed by all that knew him, particularly his family and those at the BIU, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, also would like to send out condolences to the family of Gary Bucci Gibbons from Harlem. Gary leaves to mourn his 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls, and a whole host of families and in Bayless Bay. And he certainly was a Bayless Bay cloak person. In fact, he and his wife Shirley, the late Shirley Gibbons, there's one of those that put their hands and their labor together and helped build Bayless Bay Club. So he will be sorely missed by those, particularly in Harlem, and those in Bayless Bay. Also, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with the marks of Shirlene Dill, who married my cousin Cullen, my blood cousin Cullen. Certainly was an employee at the credit union at one time, and certainly a loving mother to her 3 children, and great and grandmother to her grands, and certainly a marvelous wife to my cousin Cullen. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time?
Mr. Speaker.
Fellow behind you would beat you that
Okay.
time. MP Jamal Simmons, you're quick on the mark that time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and welcome back. I rise today on several sad occasions. The mark and acknowledge the passing of Mr. Perry Splithead Smith. It's quite a loss. Quite a loss. I send my deepest condolences to his family, his children, and his grandchildren. Quite a loss there. I'd also like to send condolences to the family of Brother Malcolm Lowe, married to my cousin Vicky, who passed just a couple of days ago. Deepest condolences to the family on their loss. And I'd like to add my voice to the condolences for Mr. Cecil Durham for his sacrifice and contribution to the growth and expansion of the Progressive Labor Party during a time when it was not easy to do so. And before I take my seat, I'd like to end on a positive note and join in the congratulations of the anniversary of former member Walter Lister and his wife, Brenda, who is also my godmother. Happy anniversary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Minister Birch.
Mr. Speaker, good morning. I'd like to be associated with the condolences to the family of Cecil Durham, particularly his widow, who I worked with several years ago. I'd also like to extend condolences to the family of Colonel Michael Darling, the third commanding officer of the Bermuda Regiment, who served with distinction. It's an interesting experience for somebody like me who was the ninth commanding officer. That meant I served with him as a well, I didn't serve with him, but I served in the regiment as a private soldier and knew him as the honorary colonel, and about 17 years later joined that rank of officers as well. And certainly he supported, I think, every commanding officer during their command. It's a very small group of people, and you are very much alone in making decisions to command. And so there's a very few and small group of people who've done it before you, who you can rely on for advice and counsel during that time. And he was one of those who provided that to me. So I extend sincere condolences to his widow and his wider family. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. MP Simmons Wade, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Again, as I've done in the past, I'm going to express my birthday wishes to my constituents. The numbers keep getting longer and longer for persons that are over 65. I have Gloria Ray, who turned 95, Ann White, who turned 93, Barbara Lee, who turned 80, Martin Brewer, who turned 80, June Butterfield, who turned 65, Clyde Wilson, who turned 70, and last but not least, Charles Dolan, who turned 105 years old. I also would like to express my condolences to Elizabeth Jones, who was a resident of Pinson Island, and also my condolences to the family of the late Laurie Robinson, who was my cousin. Laurie was a teacher in the education system for almost 30 years. She taught at West End Primary, and then she taught at Sands Middle School. I give my condolences to her children, Malik and Malay. At the funeral, which was certainly a celebration of life, and I associate Minister Wilson, a celebration of life, her children, I should say her students, so many of them attended her funeral. They were actually the pallbearers. You had family members that came and expressed what a difference she made in terms of the education and in the lives of their children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Whip, are you on your feet for the condolences? Ms. Whip? No.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
have the floor.
Good morning, everyone, please. Mr. Speaker, with some sadness, I wish to ask that condolences be sent to the family of Ryan Bearden. He's the son of Sasha Bearden. Ryan was tragically lost his life in the most recent traffic accident on Khyber Pass recently. Actually, Ryan was on his way to work. His business, family business, is in my constituency, so he wasn't far away from his job when he tragically lost his life. I had the opportunity to speak with Ryan on a couple of occasions as I visited the family business and found him to be a very nice young man, if I could just describe him like that. So I would imagine that he's really going to be missed by his very large family and friends. So I ask that condolences be sent on our behalf. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I associate the MP from C25. Mr. Speaker, I'd also like to be associated with the congratulations to Pembroke Hamilton Club as they reside in my constituency and on their back-to-back winning of the league. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Does any other member, Minister Tanae Ferbert?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to also associate my remarks this morning with those of MP Burgess in regards to the condolences for Mr. Gary Gibbons, Uncle Bucci, of Harlem Heights, wanting to send my sincere condolences to his family. It is, I wanted to share that the family, the boys in particular, and the girls took good care of their father. And he will be a miss because many of the other Harlem community members also looked out for Mr. Gibbons as well. And so he will be a huge miss to the Harlem Heights community. So condolences to the Gibbons family. Also wanting to acknowledge condolences to Miss Marie Tucker. Miss Marie Tucker, the mother of Kim and Gina, Dr. Gina Tucker, and some other adopted family members, like to associate MP Fogo and MP Diallo Rebane in regards to the condolences with Marie Tucker. Miss Marie Tucker was also a stalwart in assisting and helping the Progressive Labor Party as well. And her involvement, I believe she is also the constituent of our premier. So again, wanting to share condolences to the family of Miss Tucker. Wanting to send congratulatory remarks to Troika Performing Arts. Troika Bermuda has been invited to perform Serafina. If you remember the play that they performed, where are we? Last year? Yeah, good. Last year, and they brought to our very own shores the play of Serafina. They have been invited to perform at the esteemed International Black Theater Festival, where they will be performing Serafina at the end of July and early part of August. So wanting to send congratulatory remarks to Troika on their accomplishments. I know they will do Bermuda proud. Also wanting to send congratulations to the Greater Smith Hill Church of God. I had the opportunity to attend a function that they had for seniors. It was a seniors tea before 3, and they actually honored 3 seniors in our community. Miss Lister, who is the mother of our very own speaker, Dennis Lister, as well as Miss Thomas, who is the owner of Jamaican Grill, and also Mrs. Young, who is the owner of Gwendolyn's, sorry, am I saying it right? Gwendolyn's Adventure Nursery. And so just wanted to congratulate that team for the work that they have put on for our seniors and the congratulatory remarks for our seniors. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Opposition Leader, you have your 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to associate myself with remarks given by Lieutenant Colonel Birch relating to the passing of Colonel Darling. I would also extend the condolences for Balvina Mae Barnes, who is former teacher and librarian at Bermuda Institute, and daughter of the late Horace and Mamie Gibbons of 7 Valley Road. I remember running around the schoolyard at Bermuda Institute, really looking for marbles or trying to get onto the basketball court as fast as I could. And she was always a firm but fair disciplinarian and very, very helpful in the library. And so she will be missed. And for those who don't know, she's also the beloved wife of late Johnny Barnes. Mr. Speaker, I'd also add a congratulatory remark to Vision Bermuda and Bermuda Lion Club on the completion of Beacon House. And I note that Minister Ferbert, I'd like to associate Minister Ferbert, who opened the event for them. It was incredibly hard work over a number of years, and they've engineered a fantastic facility for the visual challenged in Bermuda. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member. MP Jackson, you have your 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to send condolences to the family of Gerald Wells. He is what I would consider to be the foundation, the heart of Millreach Road. He had his homestead there. He first really caught my eye because he is the grandfather of Naki Wells. And so that was sort of celebrity status in my eyes. But I always will remember Mr. Wells because he really cared for his neighborhood. And we first got into a relationship trying to work out how best to navigate the small carriage roads on Millreach. And he was most helpful with works and engineering. He was generous with maybe the possible use of some of his land in order for the trash trucks to maneuver through the neighborhood, etc., which fortunately we found a solution without. But I just wanted to say that he really was a voice and a heart of the neighborhood, and he will be sorely missed. Fortunately, I did have a chance to have a chat with him recently, and he's just always been a good yet spirited individual, and he will certainly always be remembered in our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you. MP Swan, it's like your 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, Mr.
Go
Speaker.
right ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with the condolences to the Wells family. Certainly, my brother Darren and the Wells family are very closely connected through Mr. Wells's son, and of course his grandson. I see quite a bit of him because he loves golf. I'm hoping that when he ties up his football boots, he will come and be one of our outstanding golf pros soon. I'd like to be associated with the condolences to Perry Smith and Malcolm Lowe, two young people that I grew up with when I was a young person in that greater White Hill, Death Valley, Whale Bay community. May they both rest in peace. I'd like for congratulations to be sent to Miss Leonie Thompson, celebrating 106 years, and Aunt Betty, whose birthday is today, and MP Fogo and MP Ming, I'm sure, would like to be associated with those. And finally, Mr. Speaker, in with the congratulations to PHC and Devonshire Colts and Wolves that were promoted. I can't sit down without congratulating the fine efforts of Drew Haywood's St. George's Colts and President Michelle Painters receiving the FA Cup for the first time since Wellington Rovers won the FA Cup back in the 50s. Let me tell you that the excitement that has been generated in the St. George's community is something that has lifted up the whole community. And now that we have the taste of red in our mouth from my cousins up at Village, we are looking west, Mr. Speaker, and looking west indeed to taste more red this summer. And I just want to say thank you to them for lifting our spirits in St. George's, Mr. Lifting our spirits in St. George's, and we just cannot wait for Cup Match to roll around. Our Cup Match team has been practicing every night since we lifted the FA Cup, and some of those same players will be playing Cup Match, I'm sure, with Jonte Smith and the others that were part of that celebration. But let me say this, Mr. Speaker, having been part of that motorcade, which brought back memories to the motorcades of Cup Match, I cannot wait to see the start of the cricket season with the spirit that is permeating. And I'll encourage all St. Georgians to join us this weekend as we celebrate once again, as we celebrate through this summer leading up to Cup Match this summer, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, and congratulations to the mighty St. George's Colts.
Now you made it a St. George's thing. MP Fogo, would you like to
That's
contribute
right.
to that as well?
I was just going to say, see what I'm dressed in, Mr. Speaker? So I would like to be associated with the football success of our St. George's football team. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to, for congratulations, to go to our one and only Sergeant of Arms with the martial arts event that he puts on for our young people. We, as I'd like to associate MP Lauren Scott, also
The whole
I'll,
house, the whole
I'll
house.
associate the entire house because as he tells his students and their family, martial arts is not just, I guess some will call it a sport, it is a way of life. And I can tell you that what it brings, I will say specifically to my grandson and some of the other young people who study under him, you can see the change in their attitude and in their spirit. And it's one of positivity. So I'd like to thank him for doing that. And I would also like to just congratulate Mr. Carlington of St. David's. He is the patriarch of St. David's. He celebrated his 102nd birthday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Fogo. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Premier?
Good morning, Mr. Speaker.
Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to be associated with remarks that have been offered to date from Mr. Cecil Durham and also the remarks that have been offered for the late Gerald Wells. I would also like to, if I could, please, Mr. Speaker, associate myself with condolences that were given to the family of Miss Marie Tucker, who, as the Honorable Minister for Youth, Social Development, and Seniors did state was my constituent, a stalwart of my particular constituency, and someone who I believe nominated me for my first run for the House of Assembly back in 2012, and a family that is near and dear to my heart. So I wish to extend condolences certainly to her son, Kim, and to her daughter, Dr. Gina Tucker. Mr. Speaker, I'm uncertain if it was done, as I wasn't able to listen all the way, but I would also, if not done, like to extend condolences to the family of the Reverend Canon Talbot Nisbet, who was without question a trailblazer and the first Black Anglican priest leading a parish in Bermuda. Was able to attend his homegoing service at the cathedral, and it was certainly a great turnout in the send-off for him, Mr. Speaker. And then finally, I would like to extend condolences and pay tribute to the late Mr. David Hughes, Mr. Speaker, and I would certainly associate the whole House. Without question, a PLP stalwart whose love for our island and his people shaped his life and his work. It was a wonderful homegoing service, Mr. Speaker. I know that you were there with me. He remained a steadfast supporter of the Progressive Labor Party, but also a steadfast supporter of Bermuda's sovereignty, and was never, ever afraid to speak his mind and listen, and made sure that all those of us in leadership of the Progressive Labor Party did listen and pay attention. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? Any other? There are none. Before we move on, let me just add a few remarks to some. I'd like to be associated with the many remarks that have been given this morning. I'll start with Mr. Durham, to the family of Mr. Durham, to the family of David Hughes, to the family of Laurie Simons Robertson, to the family of Mrs. Tucker, and to the family of Perry Smith. The real sad piece about the family of Perry Smith is that they just buried his brother about 3 months ago, I believe, and now having to do the same thing over for another brother. So we should really feel that loss. And the condolences sent to Mrs. Barnes, his family, and the congratulatory remarks given to Mr. Walter and Brandon Lister on the anniversary. Of course, I like to be associated with that. And the remarks of congratulations to the Sergeant of Arms on the martial arts tournament. I'd like to add to that, MP Fogo, the little fellow who got that big trophy that was almost bigger than him, my great nephew, that's Terrace grandson, my brother Terrace grandson, young Quentin, won that huge trophy, and we teased him still that the trophy is practically almost the size he is, so large. And I'd like to add to these remarks the condolences to the family of the late Mrs. Victoria Prime Jackson. I've known Mrs. Jackson for so many years, it's hard to count how many years I've known Mrs. Jackson, go back to my early teen years. And I been close to her family all those years, and I send special condolences to her daughter, Georgette, her granddaughter, Brene. And one thing you knew about Miss Jackson, you always knew where she stood. We used to do it with her. She was a straight shooter. She didn't take much nonsense. And if she liked you, she let you know she liked you, but she didn't tolerate much swaying in between, in a sense. She stood where she stood, and we respected her for that. And I know the impact that she's had in her family, and as well as her church community, and her loss will surely be felt by many in this community. With those few remarks, we'll now move on. The next item on the order paper this morning is matters of concern, matters of privilege. There are none. Personal explanations, there are none. Notice of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, there are none. Introduction of bills. Introduction of bills, there are bills going to be introduced by on behalf of the deputy. Yes, okay, yes. Good morning.
Mr. Speaker, I am introducing the following bill for its first reading so that it may be placed on the order paper for the next day of meeting, namely the Registration, Births, and Deaths Amendment Act 2024.
Thank you. And Minister of National Security?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm introducing the following bills for their first reading so that they may be placed on the order paper for the next day of meeting. The Cybersecurity Act 2024 and the Computer Misuse Act 2024.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Opposition bills, none. Private members bills, there are none. Notice of motions, there are none. The now members and for the listening audience takes us to the orders of the day. The first item on the order this morning to be debated is the second reading of the Public Health Council Amendment Act 2024 in the name of the Minister of Health. Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill entitled the Bermuda Health Council Amendment Act 2024 be now read the second time.
Any objections? There are none. Continue, Minister. No problem.
Mr. Speaker and honorable members, I stand before you to introduce the bill entitled the Bermuda Health Council Amendment Act 2024. Hereinafter, I'll refer to that as the bill. One of the principal objectives of this bill is to allow for the collection of data necessary for improving healthcare outcomes and ensuring equitable access to services. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Health Council Act 2004, the Act, gives the Bermuda Health Council, and I'll refer to them as the Council, authority to ensure the provision of essential health services and to promote and maintain the good health of the residents of Bermuda. And this is pursuant to Section 15(1)(a). Section 7 of the Act also provides for the minister, after consultation with the council, to give general directions as to the policy to be followed by the council in the performance of its functions as appear to the minister to be necessary in the public interest, and the council shall give effect to any such directions. Mr. Speaker, the government relies on the council in fulfilling its purposes to regulate, coordinate, and enhance the delivery of health services in Bermuda, to make evidence-based recommendations. However, the council does not have all of the legislative authority required to fulfill its role. Health system transformation and the implementation of universal health coverage specifically requires an expansion of the functions of the council. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Health Council Amendment Act 2024 will give effect to the council's authority to ensure the provision of essential health services and to promote and maintain the good health of the residents of Bermuda by establishing that the minister may direct the council to collect certain data from health service providers, licensed insurers, and approved schemes, and requiring the provision of such data. Mr. Speaker, the Bermuda Health Council Amendment Act 2024 makes provisions to govern this collection of data and information by the Health Council. Mr. Speaker, the 2023 throne speech proposed legislation, quote, to support data collection to control medical copays, end of quote. This follows a 2022 throne speech initiative to understand the drivers of medical co-payments, which more correctly, the term is patient responsible portion or balanced billings, but we all know it as co-pays, but the technical term is referred to, Mr. Speaker, as patient responsible portion or balanced billing. Mr. Speaker, although not stated in the throne speech, the initiative is focused on the vulnerable populations only, and the government is committed to controlling the patient responsible portion or the co-pays of those members of our community that are vulnerable. Mr. Speaker, the patient responsible portion of healthcare service fees represents the delta between the fee or the price that's set and charged by the provider and the portion that's covered by the patient's health insurance policy. For many, Mr. Speaker, there is a lack of clarity with respect to both the provider charge and the level of insurance coverage, and the result is an uncertainty that can lead to patients avoiding treatment due to the actual or anticipated out-of-pocket expenses. Mr. Speaker, the Council currently lacks the required data and information needed to assess the factors determining the payments and thereafter making appropriate recommendations. Targeted data collection from health service providers is a necessary first step, Mr. Speaker, to reveal the drivers of healthcare costs for providers which contribute to the fees or the prices set by those health service providers. Similarly, targeted data collection from health insurers and approved schemes would also, Mr. Speaker, assist in understanding the reimbursement decisions for insurers, and from there, a strategy and action plan for government intervention that is specific and progressive can be sought. Diella. Mr. Speaker, a stakeholder engagement session on the 28th of November 2023 focused on the collection of data to inform the drivers of co-payments. And coming out of that session, it is acknowledged that the correct term to use is not copay, but rather balanced billing or the patient responsible portion. So, Mr. Speaker, while the throne speech initiative is specific to the patient responsible portion of the health service provider's fees, there are additional areas of the health sector where the Council requires the ability to collect necessary data. For example, Mr. Speaker, the collection of data regarding diagnostic order rates would support the Council's efforts to identify any overutilization of health services. While anecdotal evidence suggests that there is an oversupply and overuse of some health services on the island, possibly driven by financially vested referrals and self-referrals, which contributes to increased health costs, the actual data to inform policy decisions around this, Mr. Speaker, is not currently available. And monitoring diagnostic ordering rates through legislation will better enable clinically appropriate testing and imaging without impeding patient access to necessary and appropriate care. Mr. Speaker, Section 5 of the Act lays out the Council's functions. The amendment through this bill clarifies and confirms the function of the Council as the entity responsible for collecting and evaluating information in aggregate and an anonymizing form to support objective decision-making with respect to population health, healthcare service delivery, and healthcare costs and payments. The Council's data collection is directed by the ministry pursuant to Section 7 to ensure that data collection is targeted and authorized and to avoid a data sweep. Mr. Speaker, though ministerial direction is provided for in the amendment, it is subject to an overarching goal of supporting objective decision-making in healthcare. The minister's role is to ensure that necessary information is collected to facilitate evidence-based policy formulation rather than to, as the ultimate objective. Mr. Speaker, you've heard me speak about you can't manage what you can't measure, and this ties directly into the issue of data collection. You need to know what you need to manage before you can, you need the measurements first before you can actually apply initiatives and manage. Mr. Speaker, a justification that is grounded in evidence will be required to progress each new data collection. It will be up to the Health Council to do the legwork of research to propose a plan for new data to be collected. For example, Mr. Speaker, If we wanted to know the breakdown by race of those insured by public or private payer to better understand our health disparities, there must be accompanying research that already links race to disparities in access to care that is being used to ground the effort. The minister may also delegate the review process if appropriate. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the ministerial direction will be guided by the overarching goal of supporting evidence-based decisions making in healthcare. The minister will work closely with the council to ensure that directives are targeted and aligned with the council's mandate. Additionally, there are provisions for transparency and accountability in the direction process, including the ability to challenge directives through appropriate channels if necessary. Mr. Speaker, accountability and transparency are fundamental principles guiding the council's operations. The amendment reinforces this by clearly defining the council's responsibilities and the purposes for which the data will be collected. Additionally, the council will engage in regular reporting to stakeholders and the public, providing updates on its activities and the use of the collected data. Feedback mechanisms such as public consultations and stakeholder forums will be established to ensure that diverse perspectives are considered in decision-making. And this commitment to openness and responsiveness will help maintain trust in the council's actions and decisions. Mr. Speaker, turning now to international best practice regarding the data collection and security. Mr. Speaker, this amendment aligns with international best practice in healthcare data collection and analysis. The council has conducted thorough research on international best practices in healthcare data collection and analysis to inform the development of this amendment, Mr. Speaker. Lessons learned from other jurisdictions, including successful approaches to data anonymization, secure data sharing protocols, and effective utilization of healthcare data for policy decision-making have been incorporated into the amendments provided. Mr. Speaker, by drawing on global experience and expertise, the council aims to implement world-class standards for healthcare data governance and utilization in Bermuda. In keeping with international best practices, Mr. Speaker, the amendment outlines the types of information required, including data related to healthcare service delivery, utilization, costs, and payments for health products and services. And this information, Mr. Speaker, will support objective decision-making, particularly in the context of implementing universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, the council will operate with transparency and accountability, ensuring that data is used solely for its intended purposes and that decision-making processes are subject to appropriate oversights. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the specific measures that will be put in place to ensure the security and integrity of the data collected by the council, since data security, Mr. Speaker, is a top priority, and the council will implement stringent protocols to safeguard information. This includes encryption measures, access controls, and regular audits to ensure compliance with data protection standards. Anonymization techniques will be carefully vetted to minimize the risk of re-identification, and the council will stay abreast of advancements in data privacy technology to continually strengthen its processes and practices. Mr. Speaker, data security also involves patient privacy matters surrounding the data collected. Patient privacy is of utmost importance, and this amendment includes provisions for anonymizing patient names and other identifying information. This ensures that while necessary data is collected for objective decision-making, individual privacy is respected. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the council will adhere to strict data protection protocols to safeguard patient information. Mr. Speaker, the natural question some might ask is, how does the data collection initiative outlined in this legislation before us, Mr. Speaker, contribute to universal health coverage, and will improved data help the health system save money? And the answer is yes, Mr. Speaker. The data collection initiative is integral to advancing universal health coverage by providing the necessary evidence base to inform policy decisions aimed at expanding access to essential healthcare services for all residents of Bermuda. Again, Mr. Speaker, we can't manage what we can't measure. By systematically collecting data on healthcare service delivery, utilization, costs, and payment mechanisms, the Health Council can identify gaps in coverage, assess the effectiveness of existing healthcare programs, and tailor interventions to address specific needs within our population, Mr. Speaker. And this targeted approach to decision making enables policymakers to design and implement initiatives that promote equitable access to healthcare services, which is a key tenet of universal health coverage. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, improved data quality and analysis capabilities can lead to more efficient and effective resource allocations and cost-saving measures within the health system. By identifying areas of inefficiency, redundancy, or overutilization, policymakers can implement targeted interventions to optimize healthcare delivery and reduce unnecessary costs. For example, better data on healthcare utilization patterns can help to identify opportunities for preventative care interventions or interventions to reduce hospital readmissions, ultimately leading to cost savings for the overall health system. In addition, Mr. Speaker, leveraging improved data to inform decision-making processes has the potential to make the health system more financially stable and sustainable while advancing at the same time, Mr. Speaker, the overarching goal of universal health coverage. Mr. Speaker, turning now to what may be of a concern to licensed health service providers, insurers, and schemes regarding what may be seen as an additional administrative burden as it relates to the collection of this data. And this is especially as it relates, Mr. Speaker, to smaller providers in particular, and how will they be able to cope with the cost and the resources that are required to comply with this legislation with respect to the provision of data. Mr. Speaker, while it's understandable to be concerned about administrative burdens, the amendment emphasizes the importance of streamlined reporting and data collection. The Council will work with stakeholders to develop efficient mechanisms for submitting information, minimizing the burden on providers, insurers, and schemes. And additionally, Mr. Speaker, the benefits of having access to comprehensive data for decision-making, such as improving healthcare delivery and ensuring equitable access to services, outweighs the initial investment in compliance. Mr. Speaker, the Council recognizes the potential impact on healthcare providers and is committed to minimizing any undue burden. Technical assistance and support will be provided to help providers navigate the data collection process, including guidance on data anonymization and reporting requirements. In addition, Mr. Speaker, the Council will engage in ongoing dialogue with stakeholders to address concerns and streamline compliance procedures where possible. Mr. Speaker, public awareness and engagement are an integral part to the success of the data collection initiative. The Council will launch targeted public education campaigns to inform residents about the importance of data collection for improving healthcare outcomes and ensuring equitable access to services. Additionally, opportunities for public consultations and feedback will be provided to solicit input on data collection priorities and address any concerns or misconceptions. And this proactive approach to engagement will help build trust and transparency in the data collection process. Mr. Speaker, these amendments would be futile without ensuring that the Council had the ability to enforce them. Therefore, failure of a health service provider, insurer, or an approved scheme to provide the information or data requested by the Council is an offense and could result in a fine of $20,000 or imprisonment or both. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the legislation as it currently stands, there are a number of provisions under the Health Council Act that have such a provision that is both a fine as well as and/or imprisonment. Mr. Speaker, the importance of this is that it serves as a strong deterrent and ensures that providers, insurers, and schemes understand the importance of fulfilling their obligation. And again, this is the obligation to produce data, Mr. Speaker. And additionally, the Council will work closely with stakeholders to streamline the reporting processes and address any concerns that they may have. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to end where I started. This bill before members today seeks to provide for the collection of data, which is necessary, Mr. Speaker, for improving healthcare outcomes and ensuring equitable access to the services of all for all of our Bermuda residents. And Mr. Speaker, this represents the full amendments being proposed. And with these remarks, I am pleased to introduce this bill and look forward to a wholesome debate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? MP Jackson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Here we go. This is my first debate on health, so I'll do my best. So the one thing I did definitely get out of this is that the data collection that we're speaking about today for the listening audience, this is not about individual patient information. This is not about clinical data. Your privacy will definitely be maintained. This is not about that. So that is very clear, and I want to lay that foundation. I just need to backtrack just a little, and I'm going to get to the copay because I do believe that the bottom line of this amendment is all about the money, but I'd like to see if I can at least break down what's going on with data collection in the health in Bermuda. This piece of legislation is pretty darn strong arm, almost excessive, and I believe it's because the government is behind the 8 ball, and they need to get this information quickly because things are not as they seem. And so as the Health Council realizes that we are in a stage in our development, especially when it comes to universal health care, we have to get up to scratch and we have to get some kind of control over the situation because of things that have broken down in the meantime. So if I step back a minute when it comes to data collection, I've been reading some of the health matters, the different strategies and strategic needs assessments, etc. And the bulk of the data that I'm seeing published under this administration in 2023, 2024 is data that is all the way back to 2016. Now, that was under the OBA administration, and we certainly were not going through the kind of turmoil in health as we are now. And I do acknowledge the fact that some of that data was because of a timely census that happened to have been under our administration, and we fulfilled that obligation and we provided the data. But here we are in 2023, 2024, and we're still looking at 2016 data and publishing it in 2023. Things have changed. Lots of things have changed. And in particular, in the health industry, things have changed. So I understand that the evolution of data collection needs to be done. And I'm not sure that the administration, the government administration, was aware of just how out of sync we happen to be. And so there's a need for us to go back and catch up. Now, Mr. Speaker, the kind of data and the kind of health services that the local population requires has become more complicated. And I'm going to use something like diabetes. So health service providers, maybe insurers, some of them have been reporting and submitting data as diabetes. I would suspect much of it has been type 1 diabetes, which is something that is you have at birth. It's hereditary. It's an established diagnosis. But type 2 diabetes in Bermuda has not necessarily been classified as that. And so you get a patient, and let's match the data. So Bermuda gets all this sort of just raw data, obesity numbers in Bermuda, chronic kidney disease numbers in Bermuda. They've got that kind of data, but we don't know where that's coming from or how it all works in the scheme of things. So if Bermuda moves into the 21st century here and starts looking at data around complex conditions, we can see that there may be a number of different ailments and illnesses that are falling under one particular category. So I'll stick with type 2 diabetes. Somebody may be obese, and they may have some chronic kidney disease. They may even have some heart failure There may also be some blood circulation and amputation involved. There can be quite a list of ailments. But none of this, well, or maybe very few of the health service providers are actually classifying all of those illnesses and saying this is type 2 diabetes. And it would help us as we, one, have to meet international standards, as the minister stated. Also, even just for us here in Bermuda to try and create a clear care pathway, we need to know the whole story around the patient. And so I can understand the sort of pivot to a more sophisticated or more complex and comprehensive form of data collection. And with that, it's needed. Again, it seems to me that it's quite late. I mean, we've been talking, or excuse me, the PLP administration has been talking about universal health care all the way back to when MP De Silva was minister, and that was what, 2010? And we're still trying to figure out universal health care. And what's worse is we're just now getting to the point where, oh my goodness, we need all of this data. So it's just not making me feel particularly comfortable that we're actually going to get where we need to go, because I believe that there are a couple of consequences that have arisen, which have, as the saying goes, cut off your nose to spite your face. So the Health Council has, decided, and rightly so, that what they'd like to do is really have, a new process, that it would be, it would include a real justification for the need for this data, that the data is needed, will be collated and used usefully, and then we will have a ministerial sign off and off we go. But there's one concern, is this going to be reciprocated? If a health service provider or an insurer wants to get some data from the Bermuda Health Council, will the Health Council assist in providing that data to those providers? Question. The Bermuda Health Council has legislated that if providers do not provide the data, they could be fined up to $20,000 and put in prison. So what about the single general practitioner medical doctor who, as the minister had referenced, is going to be put in a position where they may have to find the resources to do this research and collect this data, that they may have to invest in some new form of technological platform software in order to provide this? And yes, okay, the minister said that the Bermuda Health Council will be willing to help. But some of this may just be overwhelming, and I'm just not absolutely confident that this kind of pressure put on people who are in the care services, they're caring for our people, and we're putting this kind of pressure on them. And it just, to me, seems a bit hard-handed, and I just don't understand why there isn't more collaboration, why there isn't a building of relationships. This has been going on for over a decade, Mr. Speaker, and I just don't understand why we're being so heavy-handed in this regard, unless, of course, it's about the money. Now, there's another elephant in the room, Mr. Speaker, and that's the Bermuda Hospital. The PLP government decided back in 2018, 5 minutes after they got into power, that they were going to change the Bermuda Hospital's billing and financial situation by providing a block grant. The relevance, as a interpolation from the audience, is that the hospital in the past would prepare financial statements, they would prepare financial billing, and in that billing, they would list the various procedures, etc., whatever the medical history was of that particular patient while they're in the hospital. And when they shared that, it would become data which these health service providers and insurers, etc., could use as a way of collecting the data, having the data from the hospital. But with this new block grant under the PLP administration, there is no billing. Nobody knows what's going on in the hospital. Nobody. So, Mr. Speaker, I guess what they've got to do now is put it into law, pull out the ruler, slap the knuckles, put in prison, fine $20,000, unless the Bermuda Hospital figures out a way to provide the data. And my point, Mr. Speaker, is that this is a consequence of the financial model that was put into place. And now we have to run around and figure out how to have a relationship with the hospital in order to provide the services and the data that is needed in order for us to come up with a universal healthcare platform. So I have a few questions, Mr. Speaker. Why do we have $2 million budgeted for a project management office for universal health care? And now we've got the Bermuda Health Council as the centralized repository of all of this data and providing all of the instruction and development for universal health care. It seems to me a duplicate of expenses. How is the Bermuda Hospital, the health service providers, and in some cases insurers, going to actually get this data to the Bermuda Health Council? And how is the Health Council going to reciprocate and give back? We know our systems are compromised. We know that our systems in some cases are dated, or they're basic because there isn't the money in the Bermuda Hospital example to buy the features that are needed for proper data collection and sharing of data. There's no money. And then on the other side of it, Mr. Speaker, what about the charities? What about all the donated services that are out there? What about the systems that they're going to need to provide data to the Bermuda Health Council? Who's helping them there? And who's even asked? They're not even in the legislation. Thank goodness, goodness gracious, $20,000 in a year in prison. But we have to consider the fact that, that there are many, many charities in Bermuda that have the data, or they have the population of people, they have the information, they've built the relationships, and probably have a very good contribution to make to the Bermuda Health Council with regard to data. And we're absolutely not even including them. Where are they in this legislation? Where are they in the minister's introduction to this legislation? Insurers. It's like they're the big bad guys out there. Well, you know what? The insurers have been providing data for a long time. They seem to be open about it. But you know what? It's really, really difficult for them to figure out where to go in the future because they don't have data. They're not getting data from the Bermuda Hospital anymore because there's a block grant and no more billing coming out of the Bermuda Hospital. So they don't have any data on that. They're not receiving data on anybody at this point, I would imagine. And it's very, very difficult for them to be able to figure any of this out. So it sounds to me like we're very, very close to the edge of a cliff of confusion and fragmentation. And I'm really concerned about it because I do believe that universal health care is a workable solution for Bermuda. Heavens, there are jurisdictions and other islands that were able to introduce and have successfully running universal health care years before us. What have we done wrong? Was it all about the money, Mr. Speaker? Was it really all about the money? And my concern is that the collection of the data, and I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of what was in the introduction to this bill, I would need to really sit down and process. And you know, fair enough if it takes me a little longer. But I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you one thing. It's all about the money. And what I'm afraid of is that it's going to be the person in the front line who's the health service provider that's going to get hit the worst, that they're going to end up with a take-home pay that is minimal compared to what's going on. Now, Mr. Speaker, patients that come into the system are not receiving the services they deserve. And so with all of what's been said, what is this legislation ultimately trying to solve? There are people in beds, in chairs, victims in pain and discomfort, lining up the hallways of the Bermuda Hospital. And what is this problem? What is this data collection legislation doing to solve that problem? We've got people who are literally in pain and discomfort because they have been waiting months and months and months for surgery at the hospital, only to be told the day before their surgery that there's no anesthesia. Mr. Speaker, how on earth are we going to find a clear pathway to healthcare in Bermuda on a universal healthcare platform when we still don't even have the data to support it or to understand what the health needs are in our community? And it concerns me, Mr. Speaker. People are giving up on healthy living. They can't afford it. They know that the copays are high. My concern is we introduce universal health care, and then all of a sudden we don't have any benefits anymore, because all we can basically afford with that is basic health care. And they don't even have, they being all of those out there that are living with illnesses right now, there are no health services in the East End. There are no health services in the West End, no clinics. How do we even have a community that can live healthy when we don't even have the basic infrastructure in place? And we're spending our time talking about how we're going to punish people if they don't provide data. It makes no sense to me, Mr. Speaker. So my bottom line is, whether this is about the money or whether this is about the data, I do not see this addressing any of the major concerns that we have in the healthcare industry in Bermuda and how it's affecting the healthy living of the people who are doing their best to access healthcare in Bermuda, which, yes, it's becoming absolutely uneconomical, difficult for people to pay copays. We've got to change that. And universal health care is a good option. But Mr. Speaker, I'm really concerned that our priorities right now are in the wrong place. We're behind the eight ball, and we've got to figure this out. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP Jackson. Minister Furbert, would you like to make a contribution at this time?
Yes, Mr.
Go
Speaker.
right ahead, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to rein this debate in because we are talking about legislation. And as legislators and policymakers, we are here today to debate the benefits to have access to information, access to data, access to statistics. If you are going to tell me that we are wrong for wanting to collect and legislate getting this information, something is wrong, Mr. Speaker. jurisdictions
Point of
all
order,
over
point
the
of order,
world,
point-
Mr.
point of
Speaker.
order.
Point of order.
Yes,
Point of
the
order.
minister's misleading the House. No one ever talked about how we do not think the importance of this data is needed. Never said that.
Mr. Speaker, we just heard, Mr. Speaker, how our priorities are in the wrong place, Mr. Speaker. It is a priority of this government, Mr. Speaker, that we collect data and statistics for our people. It is not unusual, as the Minister of Health already explained, that it is standard practice in other jurisdictions to collect such data. And actually, Mr. Speaker, if you go online right now and you did a search, a website search in regards to data as it relates to prices in healthcare industries, you will find it. But why in Bermuda must it be a secret? Actually, Mr. Speaker, I got a phone call this morning. This morning, someone called me and they said, Minister, you know, I have this healthcare bill, and usually I have this charity who covers my copay. I never knew how much the actual bill was until the charity told me that they can no longer cover it. Is it right, Mr. Speaker, that you can go into a store and you can publicly see displayed prices, or you can go online and shop and you can publicly see displayed prices, but in our very own healthcare system, we have to go in blindly, not knowing what prices are? It's wrong, Mr. Speaker, until you ask. There are a lot of people who go to their healthcare professionals and they just go because they need the help and the services. They don't even ask the price because we have a healthcare system with insurance that covers a percentage of the costs. But it's not until it becomes a burden or they have to go or becomes a crisis where people want to find out what the actual cost is, right? All we're doing, Mr. Speaker, if any good business is out there, any good business that has good business practices, they would already have their pricing in place. It shouldn't be any extra work. And just to educate this House, Mr. Speaker, we're talking about charities. Charities are mandated through the Charities Act to submit their financials. No, but we're educating this House to, as legislators, what is already out there. And also, as far as Bermuda Health Council, as legislators, we should know that, the Bermuda Hospitals Board has legislation in regards to what their prices are. Mr. Speaker, one thing we share a commonality in this room. And we, at some point in our lives, will all be healthcare patients. Please don't tell me you don't want to know what you're paying for healthcare. And actually, Mr. Speaker, we just had a series of town halls for the National Senior Strategy. The number one thing that comes up for our seniors is the cost of healthcare. So we are making it a priority, and we are making it a governmental responsibility under the Bermuda Health Council to make sure that we are able to collect data, statistics, and information as it relates to healthcare costs in Bermuda. And some may say, oh, well, it's a hefty fine. We take healthcare. This government takes healthcare serious. And if people are not willing to give over the information in a timely manner, they have to know what the repercussions are. So get it in. And as a healthcare professional myself, Mr. Speaker, I would be compliant comply. Our people, us as patients, have the right to have access to services in which we know what the costs are. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any MP Fairman, would you like to make a contribution at this time?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague MP Susan Jackson has spoken to the substance of the bill, and I don't propose to add to those perceptive and heartfelt remarks. Let me be clear, the opposition accepts that health data collection is necessary and accepts that health data collection should be encouraged. And when Minister Kim Wilson said, quote, "You cannot manage what you cannot measure," we would say, we agree. But what should happen, Mr. Speaker, when someone does not provide health data? What should happen? How is the government to respond to the non-provision of information? The opposition believes it is wrong to incarcerate people for the failure to provide health data. It is wrong to incarcerate people for the failure to provide health data. Mr. Speaker, civil penalties, such as fines, exist to punish breaches of the civil law, breaches that happen every day throughout our community. In sharp contrast, criminal penalties, such as imprisonment, exist to punish breaches of the criminal law. Mr. Speaker, there's been a dangerous trend by this government to add imprisonment as a penalty to matters that are not and are not remotely criminal in nature. Let me give you some recent examples, Mr. Speaker. We had the Invasive Alien Species Act 2021. That imposed up to 2 years in jail if you have the wrong type of plant in your garden. 2 years in jail for the wrong type of plant. We had the Financial Assistance No. 2 Act in 2023. And that provided that where an applicant for financial assistance uses, quote, insulting language, quote, that applicant could face up to 6 months in jail. Someone seeking financial assistance who's frustrated and anxious and uses insulting language can go to jail. Really? Jail. Criminal sanctions are appropriate for crimes. Putting Bermudian workers in jail for non-criminal matters is a very, very dangerous precedent. We hope that those in this chamber will support the amendment that we propose today to remove imprisonment as a sanction in the amendment. Let me additionally talk to who might be put in jail, because in our view, this bill is overly broad in its scope. The preamble of the bill provides that this can apply to licensed health service providers, licensed insurers, and further, Mr. Speaker, and importantly, to approved schemes. Now, there's no definition in this act as to what an approved scheme means, nor is there a definition in the original Principal Act of 2004 that's being amended as to what an approved scheme means. And I hope that the minister will clarify in response what an approved scheme means. Because if it happens to be specific approved schemes that are overseas for specific international businesses and banks and insurance companies, etc., that's pretty thin ice. So it's a bit vague, not defined, what it can apply to if these people can be put in prison. And let's remind ourselves, Mr. Speaker, that's any worker in that sector, any worker in those sectors. Mr. Speaker, to put it simply, fining a corporate entity is one thing. Putting individual workers in jail is simply wrong. Now, the minister, when she spoke to this specific point, described the sanctions in this amending act as, quote, an additional administrative burden, end quote, an additional administrative burden. Well, with respect, that slightly understates the seriousness of what the government is doing here. And with greatest of respect to the learned minister, what is actually doing is threatening imprisonment to those who don't provide health data. And that's not appropriate. It's draconian, it's extreme, and it's unfair. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Is there any other member? MP Simmons Wade, you have the floor.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Speaker. First of all, I'd like to applaud the minister for presenting this legislation for the collection of data by the Bermuda Health Council. I'm sure most of us are patiently waiting for healthcare reform to come into this country. I understand, I guess I'm trying to understand why Ms. Jackson was a bit confused with the information. There is a lot of information that is being presented, and I think it's important to read and understand the information before we go on a path of criticizing what we're doing for the collection of data. It's important to make evidence-based decisions. No country moves forward without having the relevant data to determine which direction we're going in. We all need equitable access to healthcare in this country. One of the things that was talked about was copays. Yes, the minister is correct. We have individuals that make decisions of not going to the doctor because they don't have the copay. But I think what's more important in terms of understanding the cost of healthcare, how many, including people in this room, when they go to the doctor or any other service, the only thing they're concerned about, what is my copay? How many people actually ask, what does this service cost? We just think about the copay. I'm guilty of that as well. The whole purpose of this is to improve access to healthcare for everyone in this country. So in relationship to what Ms. Jackson said, yes, it's about the money, but more important, it's about the access to healthcare for everyone in this country. But the cost of healthcare is skyrocketing in this country. And it's only going to be the very wealthy, if we don't have healthcare reform, who have access to healthcare. And I do declare my interest. I am on the Bermuda Hospital Board. So preventative healthcare will make a difference in terms of access to get into that hospital or the need to go in the hospital. So what happens, you have people who go in the hospital because they do not take the time and attention to take care of themselves. Sometimes it's health decisions, sometimes it's exercise, sometimes it's food, etc. But we do not take the time very often to look out for ourselves and take care of ourselves. So there is a personal responsibility to everyone to look out and take care of your health care. As a country, I think everybody knows and acknowledges the need for healthcare reform. I think even though there's some concern about compliance, I think everyone is committed, including medical professionals, the general public, to participate and to comply with the collection of data. Yes, there will be some issues, but I do not believe that as a country, we are not committed to get access to healthcare. We are not committed to reducing the cost of healthcare. Every year we look, your insurance policy is going up every single year. When you talk about the copays, when you talk about the cost of healthcare, everyone in this country should be concerned of what it costs to have access to healthcare. When you stop and look at the individuals who have to go overseas to get healthcare, and you realize, yes, you have to go to the LCCA. Everyone doesn't have the difference in the money for healthcare. Someone made a comment to me. Some people are going to die because they don't have the proper access to healthcare. This should never, ever be the case in any country, and it should never be the case in this country. So the importance of data collection, you can't undermine the importance of data collection. The importance of data collection. I really do not think that this legislation that allows the Bermuda Health Council to collect data will have individuals concerned about how they're going to provide the data. We as a country need to improve access to health care for everyone in Bermuda, not just the individuals that can afford it. Mr. Speaker, I encourage everyone who is listening to go to any public education that's provided by the Bermuda Health Council to know what's the importance of the data and how we make decisions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. On the cusp of afternoon, but good morning, Mr. Speaker, to my colleagues and those in the listening audience. Mr. Speaker, I came into the house this morning, right, with an idea to give some comments. And then I said, well, the minister's brief was actually so comprehensive, there is no need for me to say anything. Then, of course, we get a comment from MP Jackson. And you know what I did, Mr. Speaker? I typed in my little computer here and said, what in the world is a definition of boogeyman? Why, Mr. Speaker? Because she came with all of these connotations that made me think, what in the world is going on? And Mr. Speaker, the definition of boogeyman is an imaginary evil spirit. The boogeyman is an imaginary evil spirit used to frighten children. Mr. Speaker, clearly we are not children, but the intent or the emphasis, and for MP Canada, you are right. Based on what you're saying, we should be afraid. But guess what, Mr. Speaker? The other thing I looked at is what happens when we cry wolf. Mr. Speaker, I want to really ask the opposition to step away from this narrative whereby every time they speak, the world is falling apart. That is not true. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, it is irresponsible for us to give that indication. Mr. Speaker, I will also go back a bit and declare my interest, because I was actually the first CEO of the Health Council, and currently I serve as the Deputy Chair of the Health Council. And so for today, I want to speak to the general public. What this legislation is doing is very, very simple and fundamental. It is putting in place the appropriate legislation and authority for the Health Council to gather data to then make good decisions. How could that be wrong? How could that possibly be wrong if the system needs better data to make decisions? MP Jackson started off, as they say, on a good line and length, in that she emphasized that the data that's going to be collected is not individualized. And so based on what's being collected, no one's going to know that Anthony had to go to the doctor for 5 times last week because of X, Y, Z. And so that probably was with respect, and as the former member said, with the utmost respect, it was the only thing that she might have said that might have been valid. So, Mr. Speaker, the other thing I want to say real quick, and I'll make some other comments in a minute, is that at the moment, there is a fine and possible imprisonment if I drive too fast. And so, Mr. Speaker, the idea is that the fine and imprisonment is actually optional. So it's not as if I am going to get fined or I'm going to get prison if I don't follow the law. And so in this instance, Mr. Speaker, we have to come back to basics. And again, I will emphasize the fact that I'm the Deputy Chair of the Health Council. And so, Mr. Speaker, the Health Council is fully aware of the implications and the concerns that will arise from data that's being gathered. The Health Council, Mr. Speaker, is aware of the implications of PIPA, the privacy information that we have to be mindful of. And so they will put in place guidelines to ensure that the data that's being gathered is in fact not in contradiction to the PIPA legislation. Mr. Speaker, I'll also go back to say that the initial formulation of the Health Council was very, very interesting to me, because persons were appointed based upon their inherent bias, in that you would have doctors, you would have pediatricians, and you have others who have specific pharmacists who have specific interests. And the idea was that collectively they'll make good decisions. And so the Health Council now has a different configuration, but they are very, very mindful of the need to ensure that the health community is on board with what's being required. And so for the opposition to talk about the fact that there is no collaboration, that is in fact factually not correct. What has happened is there has been significant consultation with those that are going to be impacted by this new legislation. Mr. Speaker, I will let everyone know that I asked that particular question. What will happen if there is a small healthcare provider that initially cannot provide the data? The response is that the Health Council itself is, of course, responsible. And the idea is if you are a healthcare provider and you have to provide the data, is to be proactive and contact the Health Council, and they will work with them to figure out a solution. They recognize that not everyone is going to be able to be initially able to comply with the data. We all recognize, Mr. Speaker, that some of our healthcare providers are more advanced than others. Some are very manual, some are very data-centric, and some are actually very, very electronic. And so there's going to be different opportunities or abilities for persons to respond. But that will be taken into consideration as the Health Council does now, Mr. Speaker. And one of the contradictions that the member spoke about is the fact that she asked the question, actually, in that, can you get data from the Health Council? And then she said that she actually checks on data that's being provided. And so the answer is yes, the Health Council does provide information to the public. Will it provide it to individuals? The answer is no, because that would be definitely a conflict, but the information is there. And so this information will actually help the Health Council to provide better data back to the public. And so this, again, fundamentally has to be supported. And to those in the general public, clearly, we want to have better information around the healthcare provision in Bermuda. There is the commentary in terms of and the minister clarified the correct language. We refer to it as the copay, as opposed to the patient contribution effectively. But it is definitely true that many of us, if not most of us, if not all of us, actually don't care about the full cost at this stage. We want to know, what do I have to pay? And that is, of course, only part of the challenge, if you will, because sometimes there is a much greater portion to pay. And I know, for example, if I go to a physio, for example, I may pay $35. The full cost might be, I don't know, $400. And if Anthony doesn't appreciate the full cost of the care, he is more likely to abuse it. And so clearly, if my back happens to be hurting at a point in time, I'm going to go every single day if I think it's an inexpensive thing to do. However, if I realize that the cost is actually more than just what I pay, I will be more careful. And I think everyone will be more careful as to how they enter into the healthcare system. So, Mr. Speaker, I will go back to say this, that the fundamental premise of the legislation is to gather data. Data is always important to make good decisions. And so I'll be very surprised if anybody fundamentally opposes what is being proposed today. And I'll go back to this idea of, wow, $20,000 is a fine and going to prison? Yes. But guess what? You don't have to incur either the fine or the imprisonment if you comply. And as I've said before, the Health Council is very proactive and will understand that there may be some limitations to persons that can respond, and they will work with them. And so again, my comment is to the smaller businesses is to be prepared and to be proactive. Mr. Speaker, I'll also say this, that we have to be, as legislators, we have to continue to be responsible in our advocacy of laws and regulations as they are proposed and implemented, because the public in many cases will, of course, take our lead. And so I'll say this before I sit down, Mr. Speaker, and that is that, well, there's two things actually. One of the previous speakers talked about the idea that we, the PLP, have put in place legislation that seems to, on a regular basis, invoke prison sentences. And I think I'm correct, Mr. Speaker, if I refer back to Petty in terms of there is an imprisonment component if you don't comply. And I'll say also, Mr. Speaker, that it would not have been introduced by the PLP government. And so sometimes what happens, Mr. Speaker, is that we have to be mindful of what we say, and unless we understand the history of what has taken place. And I may actually, Mr. Speaker, on that note, speak on the motion to adjourn, because there are some other issues in terms of us not understanding our history, but I'll leave that alone for now. I'll just say one more time, Mr. Speaker, to the listening public, let's be sure that we understand fundamentally what the government is doing and get away from this the narrative, which happens all too often, in that it makes an appearance as if the world or Bermuda is actually falling apart. That is not true, Mr. Speaker. The government, of course, is very responsible and responsive in what it does, and we'll always put in place legislation that's going to assist the general public and Bermuda in general. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, MP. Opposition Leader, would you like to make a contribution at this time?
I would. Thank you, Mr.
Go right
Speaker.
ahead.
Mr. Speaker, I rise this afternoon to speak to or follow on from my colleagues as it relates to the Health Council Amendment Act 2024. Most especially, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to speak to some points that were raised by earlier speaker, including the one who just took a seat, about our role as legislators and this narrative or boogeyman theory that every time you bring up something bad, you're a boogeyman. I just wanted to speak to context, Mr. Speaker, because I agree that as legislators, our role is actually quite expansive and requires us to do something that not everyone can do. We're elected to do, amongst other things, to bring context to every piece of legislation that comes before this honorable House. If we were to simply reflect on the legislation without any kind of correlation, causation, or context, or understanding the environment in which it acts, I think we would be doing a disservice to our fellow Bermudians. To that end, Mr. Speaker, the questions and points being raised by the opposition today relate to the feasibility, consequences, and risk management of this legislation. Specifically, I'll speak to the consequences part, because as my honorable colleague had outlined, there are criminal penalties associated with this legislation. Criminal penalties being the most severe and can be cataclysmic. If you can imagine a person or a healthcare provider being imprisoned, what that would do to their book of business. When there are other mechanisms of enforcement to achieve compliance, having work in the compliance area, and as well as a number of members in the government side, we're well aware that there are multiple tools to get people to comply with any legislative requirements. So I would push back on the narrative that simply because we're talking about the context of this legislation, that we are in some way, shape, or fashion telling the world or telling Bermuda that the whole world is burning down. What is more likely is that we are simply clearly and rationally outlining surrounding circumstances to legislation. To that end, Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask a few questions to the Honorable Minister of Health. In the first instance, as it relates to the IT infrastructure, this is a data collection exercise. And to that end, we obviously are in the middle of a number of developments relating to cybersecurity and information security in Bermuda, as well as our ability to protect that information. This honorable House has already seen the tabling ministerial statement relating to Cybersecurity Act, and later on we will be debating a motion to look into the cyber attack of September 2023. So to that end, given that there's quite a lot that is not yet known about our cyber infrastructure, my question to the honorable minister is what assurances does the public have that this information is appropriately protected from cyber attack and other threats? And also, I note that the honorable minister has said that the Health Council will work with providers to streamline data submission. But he also added that some guidance would be issued. And my question is to the honorable minister, once this legislation passes, how long before data collection is given the guidance notes, or sorry, how long before the guidance will be issued before data collection begins? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member. Does any other member wish to make a contribution at this time? Minister?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Health has embarked on a process where she's trying to move along our healthcare system so that we can get to a place where healthcare is more accessible and affordable for all. I think that is a vision that we all collectively can support on both sides of the house and basically the general public. There is a set of steps that you require to engage in to achieve that goal. The experts have indicated to us, in order for us to make informed decisions, we need to first have the data. But you simply can't request data without having a framework to request that particular data and obtain that data. And so what we're doing is putting a framework in place. We can put a framework in place that then healthcare providers look at the government and say, I'm not providing you with this information. So you must have an enforcement provision for those persons who don't comply. And as a result of that, what you want is a general acceptance of voluntarily providing the information, and you put an enforcement provision as a deterrent. And there are steps you get to before a deterrent. And this government, while it legislates enforcement, the person would have to go in front of the courts, and the courts are the one who decides what is the actual punishment to be given to that individual, while the legislation is guidance as to what may happen. This is not ununique to other pieces of legislation. For example, MP Richardson brought up about petty. And there was an amendment made by the opposition in 2014 on the Petty Act. And in that amendment, which you can find online, you can clearly see that there is a fine and there is imprisonment. If you go to the Piper Act, which is a 2016 piece of legislation which was passed in this House, it is a $25,000 fine and also a punishment of imprisonment if persons are not compliant with that act. It is false for the opposition to come here and create this narrative as though they do not support imprisoning persons for contravening acts where persons are either disclosing information or refusing to disclose information. And so we're following on with what is consistent with legislation. I'm not here advocating that it is wrong, because this government is putting forward legislation which includes the similar language. Mr. Speaker, we must have honest debate, and the public expects that we come in this House and we operate with a sense of integrity so they can get clarity on what we're doing and how this impacts their lives. One will believe that what we're doing today is not in the best interest of the public, when it actually is. It is in the best interest of the public, because in order for us to progress, having a regulatory environment where we can control costs and fees in Bermuda, we need to follow the necessary steps. So I applaud the Minister of Health for bringing this legislation today. I'm asking for the opposition to be more responsible in terms of their discourse pertaining to this particular legislation. And that sums up what I had to say for today, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister. Does any other member wish to make a contribution? MP Cannoneer, would you like to have your few minutes now? MP Cannoneer?
Actually, I appreciate the Minister Haywood's, I would say, comments as to the nature of this particular bill. I don't think any of us are arguing or dissenting to the nature of this bill that is before us. And we also recognize and appreciate the fact that it is a process. It certainly is a process. I think one of the concerns that I have had is that this idea of this universal insurance has been around since before 2012. I guess it builds the question, That's a long time now, 13, 14 years going by, where we're still been bantering this back and forth. But at least I recall at that time, I believe it was Minister De Silva who brought this whole idea forward. So I appreciate the fact that we are moving in the right direction. There's a fair comment to say that we may be moving at a snail's pace towards it, but we're moving towards it. And I recognize that and agree with that. I think the concerns thus far that has been brought up is that we may believe that, and I'm not going to center around this, my comments around, we believe that the imprisonment may be a bit much without having information that the health providers and the health insurance companies are not already complying. We already recognize that the health providers and insurance companies in particular provide information on a monthly basis to the government, which is to work with them. Whether or not you're getting it in the form that you want it or not, we have talked to the insurance company. We know that they're providing it, and I'll declare my interest. Being the general manager of People's Pharmacy for about 13 years, it was a bit of a headache, quite frankly, dealing with the health department, the council, and ensuring that data was correct. In fact, and I was in the middle of a huge case whereby massive amounts of money was going missing, and come to find out it was being stolen within the health department. Now, that's not to cast a black eye on the health council in and of itself, but the example of what I'm trying to get to here is that, we have a dual responsibility here. We also recognize that the hospital is not providing on a monthly basis data to the health council. And that's probably one of the biggest pieces to ensuring that we do come up with a proper program and methodology that allows for us to bring premiums down. And if the hospital is not providing the information, and we've got health insurers and health providers providing information, hold on a second, we're giving massive amounts of money to the hospital and we're not getting data from them when we are from the private insurers? I think we need to start talking to the hospital first and say, hold on a second here, guys. We're about to put legislation in place here. You need to provide the information. And maybe that's the premise behind this particular bill, that they're not getting the information that they should be getting from the hospital. I don't know. But it would be good to hear from the minister the relationship that the health council has with the health providers, with the health insurance companies, and also with the hospital in providing the information that is needed and required to get to the point of what this bill is all about and what this has universal care has always been about, and that is bringing premiums down. It's a hot mess right now. That's not a boogeyman theory. That's just the facts. The facts are it is difficult, and we need legislation like this here, frankly, because it's a hot mess trying to get to this point. But if the Health Council is having trouble with the mandate that it has right now and 42 employees to keep up, we're going to provide them with more data. Who's going to handle that? I have not heard about the structure from the minister as to exactly how we're going to handle. This is a massive amount of data. The cause is brilliant. The cause is brilliant. But the methodology is what we're not hearing as to exactly how this is going to work. And the concern I have is already we're in a hole. HIP, financial care. In order for us to keep the premiums down, as the premier stated in the budget book, he made the statement, we've got to go to borrowed money to help keep the premiums down. So your HIP and your financial care, the benefits that you get are actually more costly than the actual benefit so that people are paying. So they may be paying $400, but the actual benefit actually costs more, which is why we're going to get the money to keep it down. So we're in a bit of a pickle here, and that essentially kicks the can down the road because you still got to pay the piper. That money has to be paid. And so it's a noble thing. The government has taken on the initiative that we're going to take monies and we're going to put it into this basket here to help keep premiums down. But at some point in time, we're going to have to pay that money. So it is imperative, I agree, to get the data so we can get to a point whereby we can make this thing actually affordable. How long that takes is my concern, because future generations are going to have to pay for going to the borrowed fund, whilst current generations are leaving. So we're in a bit of a pickle here. So I recognize this is a good cause. However, the practicality of this here, when we can't get the health council, when you have issues of getting NGOs, nonprofit, and these providers, getting them paid in time, because they're donating a lot of services. And the question I have is okay, so who's collecting that data for these providers who give pro bono? One of the arguments I had back some time ago about the pharmacies, we're going after the pharmacy fee. We have no idea, declaring my interest again, as I said, how much costs even the pharmacies in giving away prescriptions so that people can get by, because they know that they can't afford it. And that's done on a daily basis, multiplied by the number of people going to a pharmacy every single day. Thousands and thousands of dollars going out to give, because they have a mandate, they have an oath that they can't turn anyone down. So they got to figure out what to do. And so the pharmacies are doing a pretty good job. Now, I don't know, again, the relationship between the health council, the health minister, and the health insurers. So we got to figure this thing out, and we got to figure it out with some swiftness. I'm hoping that as we move through this thing, because it is, quite frankly, extremely expensive to have health insurance. And now we're hearing that it's going up 18, 20% in some areas. Next month, is it? Next month, it's going up again. 20% going up, health insurance. So we're going to...
Point of information, Mr. Speaker.
Point of information.
Yeah,
Yes.
Thank you. Just for clarity and edification of our honorable colleagues and the honorable member who just allowed me to clarify, you'll recall that there was a heavy discussion here in the House, and we made some amendments to the legislation that are being proposed as it relates to the increase of the standard premium rate, which is the only portion of our insurance that can be controlled by government. And notwithstanding that it was suggested by the actuaries that we would see an increase of $540 per person per year, the government took drastic steps to avoid that. So I just want, for edification of the House, that the standard premium rate did not increase. It has not increased since 2019, and this government has maintained consistent about that. What the private insurance companies are doing, we have no control over, but what we can control is the rate that is governmentally legislated by this House. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for that information. And it really goes back to the point, as I said already, that the service that is being provided by the government that they can control, the money's coming from somewhere else to supplement this challenge. And so with it coming from somewhere else, we got to pay the piper. We're still paying for it. We got to get the whole system to a point whereby, which is why we want this data, to get it to a point where we can really hone in on lowering the premium. My question is, how long is it going to take? How long is it going to take, since we've been talking about this for over a decade, more than a decade, of getting to this point? I said I appreciate the fact that this is a move in the right direction. But quite frankly, this is taking too long, because in the meantime, our seniors, our middle class, and our low income continue to suffer because they can't afford it. They just can't afford it. And so until we get to that point, we're going to continue to borrow. The question is, how much is that money going to cost us in the borrowing to keep it down? Noble cause, I understand it. I understand it. But we got to get to the point where we're moving far swifter. Listen, Mr. Speaker, the last time that we had a report from the Bermuda Health Council was back in 2018. 2018. We haven't had a report since. And in 2018, the report said health system, public and private cost. Total. Let me get the total right. Where is it here? $736 million. $736 million. That's 2018. I can't imagine what it is now. This is from the 2018 report from the Health Council. I can table it if you wish. Yes, but it is a report from the Bermuda Health Council report. It comes from their report. You can look it up. I looked it up. That's the last time we got a report. The minister should know that. The last time we got a report was in 2018 that stipulated 700. Okay, well, I will ask the question then. Can the minister tell us how much we are spending as of 2023 for health costs, the health system? Can't, because we haven't had a report from the Health Council. So that's why you wanted that. Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry. The health. So you're saying that the Bermuda Health Council is not providing the information to you? Well, that's what you're suggesting. So we're going to cross hairs here. All I'm saying is I got the data here, and in 2018 it cost us $736 million. The question is how much is it costing us now? And so we got to move faster in getting this information forward. The only contention that we have at this point in time was the imprisonment. You've already heard the arguments. I'm not going to go as far as that there. We heard about charities and the likes. Well, you know, there might be some in-between ground there as opposed to imprisonment. I don't know. Like a fine, something, I don't know. But I think we should probably be looking at that in the future with all other measures when it comes to nonprofit organizations and charities and the health insurance and the pharmacies and all these folks who are doing stuff pro bono that we need to identify as well. And I haven't heard that we are collecting that information of pro bono. So with that in mind, Mr. Speaker, I know it's lunchtime. I'll sit down. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member. Members, at this time, it's 12:30. I'm going to ask if the minister would like to move us to lunch.
Mr. Speaker, I move that we rise and attend lunch and return at the sitting at 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Thank you. Members, the House now stands adjourned until 2 p.m. and we'll come back and we'll continue this debate and then move on to the next item. It's on the order paper. At this time, we're adjourning for lunch.